Okay, so I'm here with Ivan Baidak from Lviv, but now, well, he's kind of been all over. And he's recently published a book. Ivan, tell us the name of your book.
Invisible. That's Invisible, Scott.
That's it, just one word. There's no subtitle.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
It's just
okay. His book is Invisible, and it's about his own experiences. But before we get deep into the book, I want to hear a bit more about you. So, if you wouldn't mind telling the audience about yourself, where you're from, your education, and when you decided to write a book.
cool. Thank you, Scott. Well, basically, yeah, I'm from Ukraine. Like my hometown is Lviv. And but I mean, as you mentioned before, recently I'm in different like countries, cities. So honestly, I lived quite a lot abroad, like before the war. But you know, when the war started, I was in Europe, and I was traveling in between like different countries here, including Canada. But yeah, I'm originally from Ukraine, from Lviv. That's where my childhood was. Well, and in terms of writing, in terms of books, so I used to study journalism. So I was kind of always into the words. And I remember myself being a small kid. I was always surrounded by books. So it's not only about writing, it's a lot about reading the stories of authors. I really adored it. That was my child's love. Also, my parents told me that when I was I don't know, quite naughty, they just read me books. It always helped a
Yeah.
lot. So basically, I was always sharing stories, like either telling stories or writing them. So I just remember my full life just creating stories. So that's how
making
it was.
making stories up.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. And so, did you go to university or college, post-secondary education in Lviv?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
What did you study?
I studied journalism.
Okay.
I mean, journalism, languages, like media. So it was still connected with writing.
Yeah. And you became a journalist as well. Did you ever work as a
Never.
journalist? No.
I never really worked as a journalist. It
Oh.
was a very short story when I was working at European Football Championship. So it was very short experience. And then
Ah.
then I went to IT, and
Ah.
I've been working like in sales, marketing, and business aspect of IT. It's like my second part of my life, and writing is another one. So I never really work as a journalist.
So, when did you decide to write a book?
When we talk about Invisible, or in
Yeah.
general,
Well.
well, yeah, in terms of Invisible, like that's my sixth book already.
Ah.
It's just it's my sixth book in Ukrainian, but I mean, Invisible is my first book published in English.
Right.
So yeah, it shares experiences of people with inclusion, people with some disabilities, with some I don't know, special aspects. I mean, I myself, I have Tourette syndrome, so it is kind of inclusion. And I mean, I have this experience living with this for my whole life. Quite hard experience, to be honest. So I
Hmm.
also met people, like other people, who have some like differences. And I was always surrounded by this, and I knew myself what inclusion is and what life with inclusion is. So I kind of knew I would write this book one day,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So the point is, I consider myself like, this. I'm still young, but I like to be called still, this old school writer. Writing about life. I mean, a bit of psychology, philosophy, like life
Hmm.
stories. But in terms of Invisible, it was more like a social message to
Right.
like to society, like what it is to live with inclusion. So I thought I would write it when I'm like quite older, when I have enough courage to write about it, because I didn't know when I would be ready for it. But still, it happened right now, and I'm happy it happened right now, because it actually can help a lot of people to accept themselves, to realize they're not alone in their some disability. And yeah, it can also help like the society to understand how they need to treat people like with special needs.
Right.
So
So, if you don't mind my asking, how old are you now?
32. I'm
32.
32.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Young cub. And
Yeah.
when did you start writing Invisible?
I wrote it 2 years ago.
Hmm.
So it was actually the beginning of COVID.
Yes.
So yes,
It
this
was a
book was
COVID
where
project.
it wasn't supposed to be a COVID project, but I got residence in Poland, so I had like half-year residence in Warsaw, and I was to write this book. I was to enjoy literary life in Poland, which never
Mm.
happened because yeah, when I arrived, it was early February, and like in 5 or 7 days, it was like total lockout. But nevertheless, it helped me to write this book way faster. So I
Yes.
wrote it like in three months. So
Wow.
my
Wow.
editor, yeah, I know, my editor was like, "How did it happen?" And I said, like, "Well, everything is closed. It's COVID.
Yeah.
I have
Nothing else
nothing
to
to do."
do.
Yeah, I'm just, my plan was like writing a bit in the morning, a bit in the evening, and rest of time to socialize. But I mean, I didn't have this opportunity, so I was writing like whole day.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, that's how it is.
And what was your first book, if you wouldn't mind? Just
Sure, sure. Yeah, well, I wrote my first book when I was very young. I was 20 years old, and it was a love story. Obviously, it was like relationship in a distance, like
hmm.
a man and a woman, or boy and a girl living in different cities, how
Ah.
they build their relationship. And it was quite romantic. It was quite nice. And it actually got very popular in Ukraine. And
Oh. What and
yeah,
what's
yeah.
what's the title?
It's personally me, personally to you.
Ah.
And honestly, like till now, yeah, you're a writer yourself. You know that writers don't like their first books, right? Because I mean, they
Well,
improve.
we don't publish them. Most of us.
Well,
They sit in the drawer. They're practice.
well, I have many unpublished as well, but
Mm.
this one was.
The
I mean,
first published book.
it was the first published book, yeah.
Okay.
So,
And is it available in English?
not yet,
No. So
not
it's
yet.
only in
Yeah,
Ukrainian.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it is
Great.
only Ukrainian, and to be honest, it is still my most popular book
Oh,
because
really?
even though I didn't like it, like the audience like it a lot.
Right. Well,
Yeah, it was
um, the,
surprising.
yeah, that is surprising. Oh, okay. So, and um, are you a full-time writer now, or what is your day job?
No, I'm not. I'm not. It's hard to be a full-time writer.
Yes.
Well, as I mentioned, I work in sales,
Okay.
and like last 7 8 years, I work in IT sales because, as you probably know, Ukraine is very popular, like IT outsourcing spot.
Yes.
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 So,
My old web host tech
mhm.
support was in Zaporizhia,
Oh,
uh,
okay.
and I had to change because the company raised the prices. But anyway, yeah, I would speak to people in Zaporizhia from time to time.
Cool. Cool.
I hope they're well now.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
so uh, Invisible, you wrote in Ukrainian originally, and it's
Yes.
published in Ukrainian, and
Yes.
it got the attention of a Canadian publisher from Hamilton. Can you tell us about that process? How did it get from Lviv to Hamilton?
Well, it's a very nice story, and it's actually somehow a family story. You see, I
Mhm.
have family in Canada. It's very far related.
Uh-huh.
Canadian family. Like my ancestors, they used to move to Canada like century ago.
Hmm.
So you remember after the First World War, there was a big wave of Ukrainians moving to Canada, and
The
one.
second wave.
Oh, it was the second wave. Yeah, it was the second wave. So among them were my some great grandparents. Yes, they moved to Canada, so we had some connection. Then the connection lost,
Mm.
but still, So one day I remember it was like almost 10 years ago. The man named Rich Baidak, he came to hometown of my father. So he found my parents saying, "Hey, I'm from Canada. We share same family name. I'm making some investigation
Hmm.
on my family roots." And actually, it was his dad, Leonard, who was building this family tree and who
Ah,
found this connection. So yeah, so we were like really far related by this like ancestors who like their great grandparents came to Canada from Ukraine as well, and they were cousins with my great
ah,
grandparents. So it's an interesting story. So we're like in contact for 10 years, corresponding with Len, sharing these photos, some news stories. They always invited me to come to Canada. I was inviting
right.
them to come to Ukraine. It never happened because, obviously, like the long distance.
In long distance,
Uh,
it's a big
it is.
undertaking.
Yeah, yeah.
Sir,
And
what part of Canada did
they're from Winnipeg.
from Winnipeg? Wow, that's where I'm from.
Yeah, 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 yeah. They're from Winnipeg. So when the war started, they said like, "Hey, you have no chance. Like, you need to come to Canada. Like, you don't have any excuse. Like,
Yeah.
there's war in Ukraine. Just you need to be somewhere, right?" And I was in Europe for that time, and I realized like, why not? It's a good chance, to be somewhere, to meet family, and you see, with books, with translations, like my publishers, they were looking for different, foreign publishers.
Hmm.
But in terms of like Canadian, it actually was my family who helped me to
Oh.
find their, yeah. So it was Natalie, also my cousin who is also into literature a lot,
Hmm.
and she was like browsing among Canadian publishers, and they
Hmm.
found Guernica, who is
Right.
specializes in foreign literature publishing,
Hmm.
and they actually even more, they did their fundraising to translate the book from Ukrainian
Ah,
to English. So it was really due to my family in Canada, and
wow.
yeah. Guernica likes the novel. I mean, when it was translated already
Hmm.
in English, so I mean, they were more interested in that.
Hmm.
So they really like it. It was nice, and they decided to publish it straight away.
Hmm.
So that's how it happened.
Right. So how did it get translated? Who translated it from Ukrainian to English?
It's Hannah Lalev and Isak Wheeler. So Hannah is like one of the best. She's a prominent translator from like English to Ukrainian, Ukrainian to English. She's
Hmm.
Ukrainian, but she always translates like in pair with native English speakers. So
Hmm.
it's Isak. He's from U.S. New York, and they work together on this translation. So and I know Hannah quite well because she used to translate some of my excerpts from other books, and also interesting because she's my neighbor in Lviv in Ukraine. So
Hmm.
I mean we kind of moved into the same neighborhood, and she lives next house, and I mean it was very interesting.
Right. Right. Um, just briefly, if you could tell us a bit about your
Mm.
path to publishing in Ukraine, or was it in Poland? How did you find a publisher?
Well, you see, there are always two stories when it comes to writers and their first books being published. So normally, it's like a miracle story when you write a book. It gets the attention, you get famous, you have this book events. I mean, you have a lot of readers.
That's the
It's such
Hollywood version.
the Hollywood version, and there's a second one when you write a lot, everyone rejects you,
Hmm.
no one wants to publish you, and only with like I don't know, the 10th novel, some small publishing house decides, okay, let it be. We're gonna publish him. So Scott, actually, the Hollywood story happened to me.
Oh,
Yeah, I was the
well
lucky
done.
one. Yeah, I mean, it's just also luck, you just personal level. Some editor likes your book
Hmm.
and believes in you. So it doesn't mean like I didn't have a lot of rejections before. It did happen, but I mean, I was still very young when I was published, so I was just 23
Wow.
years old when I was published. Yeah,
And tell us, can you tell us the name of that publisher?
it's Croc Publishing House. Yeah,
In
they're
and
from
they're based
Ternopil.
in Toronto. Okay, great.
Ternopil. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just maybe drill down a little bit.
Mhm.
Where do you write? Do you write at home? Do you have a special room? A favorite cafe you go to? And where does the magic happen?
Well, different places. Yeah, as you mentioned, yeah, I have some, special cafe. For example, one of my books, which is called A Man with My Name, and that's my favorite novel of mine. It was just before Invisible. So I was writing it morning in one cafe and afternoons in different one. So I
Okay.
get
Okay.
my morning coffee and I write my morning passage, and I then go for some stronger drinks, and I write my evening.
Oh, great.
uh, but yeah, but you see, as I mix my uh, day job life and my writing career, so it's mainly uh, I write when I get some residence. I write when I can take a sabbatical from work, so I can allow myself not to work for like half a year and write a book during this time. So it can be different.
Right.
So I also like to go to some different place, perfectly some small town to have new life being invisible and writing. So
Right.
just
Wow.
maybe
Okay.
different.
So you are moving around a lot, it seems, because
Hmm.
full disclosure to the audience, I first met Yvonne in San Francisco, I think 5 years ago when I was
5 years ago.
on a trip. This was sort of a preliminary look around in San Francisco for a few days before I went to a writers' conference in Russian River.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and so, if you wouldn't mind, tell us about your peregrinations. You're moving around the world. I mean, Lviv, you mentioned Poland, San Francisco. You told me you were in Edmonton and Toronto, and now you're in France.
Sure. Yeah. Well, Scott, San Francisco was one of the best periods in my life, actually. And so, as I told you, like 8 years I'm in IT. I'm making the sales, but I remember, this year is very hard, and you just burned there. It's just very hard to work all the time. So I
Hmm.
remember when I got to San Francisco, I moved in with my friend who's been living there like for years, and I was saying like, hey. I'm tired of IT. I don't write. I don't get stories. I'm
Hmm.
bored. I need to change my life. And he was a manager of a restaurant. And he said, okay, you need to take a break, man. You need to
Yeah.
go and you need to bartend. You need to serve. You're going to be among people. You're going to get a lot of stories. That's what I was doing like in San
Yes,
Francisco, if you remember. Yeah.
I do.
So it was really one of the best times in my life.
Mm.
I didn't have this pressure of work because I mean it was
Mm.
quite easy, and I was meeting like so many people all the time. Like, well, I met you. I'm happy
Right.
about it, and there are
Yeah.
so
I
many other
remember that
people.
evening so well.
Okay, I hope I did a good job.
Yeah, it was
you
great. It was
know. Yeah, and actually that's what I plan. One of my next plans when the war is over, I also want to get break from IT work again.
mm,
And my plan for in 1 year to change like 5 or 6 works to try some other life. I don't know. I want to be a barista in coffee shop. I want to be, I don't know, food delivery, like whatever, just so that I'm among people. I'm just not only with IT and numbers and stuff. But yeah, as for moving around, like I really like it, and it happened before the war. So I was between U.S. And Poland. I was also in Mexico, Austria, because I lived and studied there. But when the war started, yeah, so I was in Poland, and like right now the war is 10 months, and
hmm
I do believe I was in like 10 countries right now, mainly. I'm hosted by a lot of artists, like art places, like literally residences. So right now I am in Arles, France.
Oh.
That's Atlas Citadel. I was
Hmm.
also hosted in like in April. I was in Cassis. There's a Camargo Foundation. Then the whole summer I was in Slovenia, in beautiful
Wow.
town of Lat, which was again I was hosted by Slovenian Writers Association. So it's mainly due to my like my writings, and that's how I get this shelter. So.
Mm. But that sounds like a kind of almost an ideal life for a writer. And are there
Well,
stories coming out of this?
they are, but as you can imagine, like there's war in my head only, and it's really hard to
Mhm.
focus on anything else because I mean you're always in news, and there are a lot of terrible stuff going on, and you're always with friends and family, and I mean they are in blackout in Ukraine,
Mhm.
whereas they can be out of electricity for days,
Mhm.
and it's really hard to write about something else. And right now I do have this. I write the daily notes of war, mainly focused on foreign audience, like
Okay.
to let their foreigners realize like what's going on in Ukraine.
And where does this appear?
Well, I publish sometimes on my website,
Okay.
but mainly I'm just writing it right now, so it's not like yet published, and
Oh,
it's very
so it's not
highly
a
unlikely.
not a news
Yeah,
site then.
no, 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 no.
Okay.
I mean, I sometimes do it on my website or like social media,
Hmm.
but yeah, but they are very sensitive for now, so I wouldn't publish it without like editing, proofreading.
Hmm.
So I assume it's going to be published one day when the war is over, maybe a couple of years from now, for like European, North American market. Yeah, but
Great.
we'll see.
Okay, great. So, um, just want to uh, ask too, your book
Mhm.
tour, assume it was the book tour. You went to Toronto and Edmonton, and other cities in North America. Is that correct? New York, I think.
Oh, no, it was Canada only.
Canada
So
only. Okay.
yeah. I was also in like obviously Winnipeg, then
Hmm.
Calgary and Montreal. So there are
Okay.
like five cities tour, and it was very intense. Like in 3 weeks, I had like 14 or 17 events. I mean,
Mm.
they were some of them were online, but yeah, but it was quite a lot, and I really enjoyed it. I really
Good.
enjoyed Canada, honestly. Yeah.
Oh, great, great. Um, Now, I want to ask you too about, well, you're not living in Ukraine right now, but what is the literary scene like in Lviv? Lviv has this reputation, the Paris of Ukraine. It
Yes.
used to be in Paris, um, and so is it a good place for artists and writers?
Oh,
Maybe
I
not right now, but
in general, yeah. Well, I do
before
believe, yeah.
Before February.
You're absolutely right. I do believe that's a perfect place to be an artist in Ukraine is to be on Lviv because it's full stage, like literally music, art, theater, anything.
Hmm.
And I remember I lived there in like downtown city, and there's always something going on. Like you can go to poetry reading, you could go to some new theater play, you can hear music from everywhere, from
Hmm.
like basically every bar. And yeah, it's like midnight in Paris. You can just live this perfect life, and I used to live it. So, and I hope I will once again.
Oh, that'd be great. That would be great. Um, Now you're living outside of Ukraine now, but you mentioned the power outages that are happening. Uh, how is that affecting writers, do you think? Writers and artists in Ukraine?
Well, you see, again, like full artist industry, it moved to the topic of war. So
Hmm.
it's really hard that anyone writes about anything else, right?
Hmm.
Because I mean, you're always in this context, and there is the only context right now, and there can be any other priorities, right? So it obviously affects, it obviously changes narratives, the themes, the topics. Uh, well, I don't know. I do believe the next 10 years, the Ukrainian literature itself, as well as any other art, is going to be dedicated to the topic of war. So I do believe that's a fact.
Hmm. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but
Hmm.
it may lead to sort of a flowering of literature again. We hope, and art in general. Tell us about Invisible. Uh, Tell us in more detail what the book is about, what it covers, and why someone, a general reader, um, perhaps who does not have Tourette syndrome or other uh, uh, special um, distinctions, should read it. What they would get out of it.
Sure. Well, that's a good point. So again, Invisible is a book about like inclusion, about like people with distinctions. Yeah, it is a very very nice word. You need to be always careful when saying the right terminology. So I was always challenging with that. So it's a book about like tolerance, about acceptance, about what it means to be different, and what life with difference is. So basically, I like to repeat there are like three main messages about this book. First one is to people with any type of distinctions, like saying that it's not a reason to give in. It's not a reason to give up on life, and you can still obtain and get the best life can give us. So it's not to hide, not to because unfortunately, yeah, the truth is that most of people who are in challenges, they rather hide. And this
Mm-hmm.
book, it's like a motivation to have a fulfilled life. Message number two is message to society, is it to realize there are a lot of people who have some differences, but they do have same life, and they do have same dreams and goals, and they want to find love, friends, job, some hobbies, etc., etc. So even though we're like different, we're all equal, and
Mm-hmm.
we deserve for a good life. So it means like to be a bit kinder and more tolerant to each other. And message number three is just basically a book for everyone, because I do believe that we all at some parts of our lives we find many reasons not to like ourselves, and it can be
Mm.
whether our appearance or some our life choices, or some of our I don't know past that we might not like. So yeah, it's a book about like these hard topics, but it's quite warm in terms to be more um, tolerant, to accept ourselves and others, and to be just nicer to each other.
Okay, great. And is it how autobiographical of a story is it?
Well, it's not autobiography, so it's not like
Mm-hmm.
plot of my life. It's not story of my
Mm.
life. But yes, there are a lot of true stories which happened to me and people I know who have some kind of distinction, because I wrote this book based on lots of interviews I had with people. So all those stories in the book, all those events, they actually happen in life.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like really like it's a very real book.
Okay, great. Um, and uh, where is it available? Where can readers
Well,
or
basically anywhere. So it's Indigo, Amazon, so some bookstores. Please remind me, is the biggest Canadian bookstore? I forgot
well,
the
it's
name.
Indigo Chapters is the
Indigo
big chain.
chapters.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
but
and there's something.
there's
Is it?
also Coles, but I think it's all owned
Mhm.
by the same corporation now. I think
Maybe,
most of
maybe.
them, most of the big chains there seem to be owned by one or two corporations. But Coles,
Uh-huh.
Chapters, Indigo, those are the big ones. And then there are some there in Winnipeg actually.
Hmm.
Oh gee whiz, what's the name of it now? There's an independent bookstore that I do like,
Uh-huh.
and visited there last summer, but the name escapes me now. I'll dig it
Okay.
up. I'll
Okay.
put
Cool.
this all in the notes in the blog, and also all the links, relevant links to Yvonne's books and his own website and so on. So we hope to see that. Finally, Ivan, I want to thank you for your time. But what are your? Oh, and that's the big cat getting in my way.
Wow. Hello.
He
No
was
worries.
lying so
He
quietly
can
there.
join us. He can join us. No problem.
Okay, move over, Ragnar. That's Ragnar the Magnificent. Um, yes. So, what are your publishing and writing plans?
Well, right now, in terms of publishing, yes, Invisible, it's actually getting a lot of attention, like in Europe. So it
Good.
might be translated into like other European languages. So it's going to be in It is already in Polish. It's going to be in
Right.
Italian,
Ah.
Spanish, German. So yeah, it's going to go international. But like as for my plans, I obviously I have a lot of ideas. I have a lot of novels I want to write, but unfortunately lack of time right now. And yeah,
Yes.
unfortunately due to the war right now, I want to like normalize my life. Just hopefully we can come back home very soon and life gets back to normal, and then it's going to be a good time to write about all those stories.
Okay. Okay. So you don't have any, burning ideas for another novel, another romance, or another, I don't know, maybe a science fiction or a thriller?
Unfortunately, no. As I mentioned, unfortunately, there's just war in my head, and those notes is the only thing I write. But yeah, it's really hard to focus on something else. But obviously, I have a lot of ideas like in my drawer, and
Mm-hmm.
they are
Oh,
just
yes.
ready any time. I have this time basically. So I open it, I write it, and yeah, it's just a matter of time.
Okay. Well, yes, and time is the magic ingredient for a writer, I think, or any
It
artist.
is. It is.
It's the most elusive quality for any artist. But anyway, Yvonne, I want to thank you very much for your time and attention, and for putting up with my clunky abilities with IT equipment.
No, no,
Uh,
it's very good.
I'm here. I'm using my old computer here, so that's why it's a bit slow. But my old computer has the camera built in, and so it's the one I use for this kind of thing. But again, thank you very much. This was Ivan Baidak, author of Invisible and a number of other books, and you'll be able to see all his links below. Thank you, Ivan.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott.